From the moment he emerged, gripping his brother's heel, Jacob's life was destined for conflict. A man who would deceive his own father, steal his brother's blessing, and flee for his life into the wilderness. But this is no ordinary story of deception and exile. This is the account of a cunning schemer who dared to wrestle with God himself and refused to let go until he received a blessing. How does a manipulative deceiver transform into the father of 12 tribes? How does a man running from his past become Israel, the one who struggles with God? Prepare to witness a journey of transformation that spans decades, crosses deserts, and bridges heaven and earth. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean from Paddan Aram. But there was a problem that would test their faith for years to come. Rebekah couldn't have children. Isaac didn't give up. He prayed to the Lord for his wife, and the Lord heard his prayer. After 20 years of waiting, Rebekah finally became pregnant. But this pregnancy was different from anything she had experienced. The babies inside her were fighting each other, pushing and struggling so violently that Rebekah feared something was terribly wrong. In her distress, she went to inquire of the Lord, seeking answers for what was happening inside her body. The Lord spoke to her with words that would echo through generations, as recorded in Genesis 25:23. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. This was no ordinary prophecy. In the ancient world, the firstborn son received everything: the largest inheritance, the family leadership, the father's blessing. But God was turning the natural order upside down. Before these children even took their first breath, their destinies were already determined. When the time came for Rebekah to give birth, the prediction of 2 nations became reality. Genesis 25:24-26 tells us, "When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob." Think about this moment. One baby comes out covered in red hair, and immediately behind him comes another, his tiny hand wrapped around his brother's heel. It was as if Jacob was trying to pull Esau back, trying to be born first, trying to claim what belonged to his brother. The name Jacob means he grasps the heel, or he deceives. From his very first moment in this world, Jacob was marked as one who would grab what wasn't his. Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born, and from that day forward, their home would never know peace. The boys grew up, and they couldn't have been more different. Genesis 25:27 describes them clearly. "The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents." Esau loved adventure. He loved the thrill of tracking animals, the satisfaction of bringing home fresh game. Jacob preferred the quiet life, staying close to camp, perhaps helping with the flocks or learning from his mother. This difference extended to their parents' affections. Genesis 25:28 reveals a family divided by favoritism. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Isaac connected with Esau through his love of hunting and the delicious meals his firstborn would prepare. Rebekah, however, favored Jacob. Perhaps she remembered God's prophecy that the older would serve the younger. Perhaps she simply connected more with Jacob's quieter nature. Whatever the reason, this favoritism would set the stage for betrayal. One day, Jacob was cooking some lentil stew. The smell must have been rich and inviting, filling the air around the tents. Esau came in from the open country, exhausted and starving from a long hunting trip. Genesis 25:29-30 captures his desperation. Once, when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." Jacob saw his opportunity. This wasn't a moment of spontaneous negotiation. This was calculated. He had something Esau wanted desperately right now, and Esau had something Jacob wanted for his future. Genesis 25:31 shows Jacob's cold response. Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." The birthright was everything. It meant receiving a double portion of the inheritance. It meant becoming the family leader after Isaac died. It meant carrying forward the covenant promise God had made to Abraham and Isaac. Jacob was asking for something priceless in exchange for a bowl of soup. Esau's response reveals his character. Genesis 25:32 records his words, "Look, I am about to die. What good is the birthright to me?" He was being dramatic. He wasn't actually dying. He was just very hungry. But in that moment, Esau cared only about satisfying his immediate physical need. He couldn't see past his empty stomach to understand what he was giving away. Jacob wasn't taking any chances. He wanted this deal locked down legally. Genesis 25:33 continues, "But Jacob said, 'Swear to me first.' So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. An oath in those days was binding, unbreakable. Once Esau spoke those words, there was no going back. Then Genesis 25:34 describes what happened next. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank, and then got up and left. Just like that, it was done. Esau satisfied his hunger and walked away. The verse ends with a devastating summary. So Esau despised his birthright. For a bowl of red lentil stew, Esau traded his future. And Jacob, the quiet one who stayed home among the tents, had just taken his first step toward claiming everything that belonged to his older brother. Years passed, Isaac grew old, and his eyes became so weak he could barely see. Sensing that his death might be near, he decided it was time to give his final blessing to his firstborn son. Genesis 27:1-4 sets the scene. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." This blessing was different from the birthright. While the birthright dealt with inheritance and property, the father's blessing carried spiritual authority and prophetic power over the future. Once spoken, it couldn't be taken back. Isaac wanted his favorite meal first, a final moment of connection with his beloved Esau before transferring his spiritual legacy. But Rebekah was listening. She had overheard everything. The moment Esau left to hunt, she sprang into action. Genesis 27:5-10 tells us, "Now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, 'Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it. Then you are to take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies.'" Jacob hesitated, but not because he thought the plan was wrong. He was worried about getting caught. Genesis 27:11-12 reveals his concern. Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, "But my brother Esau is a hairy man while I have smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him and would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing." Rebekah was willing to risk everything. Genesis 27:13 shows her determination. His mother said to him, "My son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go and get them for me." She was so convinced this was right, perhaps remembering God's prophecy that the younger would rule over the older, that she was willing to accept any curse that might come from deceiving her husband. Jacob brought the goats, and Rebekah prepared the food exactly the way Isaac loved it. But she didn't stop there. Genesis 27:15-17 describes her elaborate plan. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skins. Then she handed to her son Jacob the tasty food and the bread she had made. Everything was ready. Jacob approached his father's tent, his heart probably pounding, wearing his brother's clothes and with goat hair covering his arms and neck. Genesis 27:18-19 captures the moment. He went to his father and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" Jacob said to his father. "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing." The first words out of Jacob's mouth were a lie. "I am Esau, your firstborn." But Isaac was suspicious. The voice didn't sound right. Genesis 27:20-24 records the tense exchange. Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God gave me success," he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not." Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau, so he proceeded to bless him. "Are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "I am," he replied. Jacob had just invoked God's name to support his lie, claiming the Lord had given him success in hunting. 3 times he lied directly to his father's face. But the disguise worked. The smell of Esau's clothes, the feel of the hairy goatskins, it was enough to convince blind Isaac. Genesis 27:25-27 continues. Then he said, "My son, bring me some of your game to eat, so that I may give you my blessing." Jacob brought it to him, and he ate, and he brought some wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him. The blessing Isaac spoke over Jacob was powerful and irrevocable. Genesis 27:27-29 records these ancient words, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed." These words echoed the covenant blessing God had given to Abraham and Isaac. Jacob had just stolen not only Esau's blessing, but had claimed for himself the spiritual inheritance that connected directly to God's promises. The deceiver had deceived, and there was no turning back. Jacob had barely left his father's presence when Esau arrived. Genesis 27:30-31 tells us, after Isaac finished blessing him and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, "My father, please sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing." Esau had no idea what had just happened. He came in cheerfully, proud of his hunt, ready to receive what he thought was rightfully his. But Isaac's response revealed the horrible truth. Genesis 27:32-33 captures the moment everything fell apart. His father Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" "I am your son," he answered, "your firstborn Esau." Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." Isaac trembled violently. The Hebrew word suggests he shook uncontrollably, seized by the realization of what had happened. He had been deceived by his own son. The blessing meant for Esau had been given to Jacob, and there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. The words had been spoken. In God's presence, they were sealed. Esau's reaction was immediate and desperate. Genesis 27:34 describes his anguish. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me, me too, my father." The image is heartbreaking. A grown man, a skilled hunter and warrior, crying out in pain at what he had lost. Isaac explained what had happened. Genesis 27:35 records his words, "But he said, 'Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing.'" There it was, the truth spoken plainly. Jacob had come with deceit. The name Jacob meant he deceives, and he had lived up to it completely. Esau's response showed he finally understood who his brother really was. Genesis 27:36 reveals his bitter realization. Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he has taken advantage of me. He took my birthright and now he's taken my blessing." Then he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Esau connected the dots. First the birthright, now the blessing. Jacob had systematically taken everything that belonged to the firstborn. The name Jacob could mean he grasps the heel or he deceives, and Esau had experienced both meanings firsthand. Isaac's answer offered no comfort. Genesis 27:37 shows how completely Jacob had claimed everything. Isaac answered Esau, "I have made him lord over you, and have made all his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son?" Everything was gone. The blessing had given Jacob lordship over Esau, authority over the family, and material prosperity. There was nothing left to give, but Esau couldn't accept this. Genesis 27:38 shows his desperation. Esau said to his father, "Do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father." Then Esau wept aloud. A grown man weeping loudly, begging his father for any scrap of blessing that might remain. Isaac finally spoke a blessing over Esau, but it was nothing like what Jacob had received. Genesis 27:39-40 records these words. His father Isaac answered him, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck." This wasn't a blessing. It was a curse disguised in prophetic language. Esau would live in harsh lands. He would serve Jacob, and only through struggle and conflict would he eventually break free. The contrast with Jacob's blessing of abundance and authority couldn't have been more stark. Esau's grief turned to rage. Genesis 27:41 reveals his murderous intent. Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near, then I will kill my brother Jacob." Esau made a plan. He would wait until Isaac died and the period of mourning ended. He still had enough respect not to kill his brother while his father lived. But after that, Jacob was a dead man. The deceiver would pay for his deception with his life. Someone told Rebekah what Esau was planning. Maybe a servant overheard him, or perhaps Esau's rage was so obvious that his intentions were clear to everyone. Rebekah immediately called for Jacob. Genesis 27:42-45 shows her urgent warning. When Rebekah was told what her older son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is planning to avenge himself by killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I'll send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Rebekah's plan was simple: run and hide until Esau cooled down. She thought it would be temporary, just a while, until Esau's anger faded. She had no idea she would never see Jacob again. Her mention of losing both sons in one day suggests she knew that if Esau killed Jacob, someone in the family would be obligated to avenge Jacob's death by killing Esau. She couldn't bear the thought of losing both her children. But Rebekah was clever. She couldn't just tell Isaac that Jacob needed to run for his life because he'd stolen Esau's blessing. She needed a better reason. Genesis 27:46 shows how she approached Isaac. Then Rebekah said to Isaac, "I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living." This was partially true. Esau had married 2 Hittite women, and Genesis 26:34-35 tells us they had been a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah. So Rebekah used this genuine concern to convince Isaac that Jacob needed to go to Haran to find a proper wife from among their own relatives. The strategy worked. Genesis 28:1-5 records what happened next. So Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him. Then he commanded him, "Do not marry a Canaanite woman. Go at once to Paddan Aram, to the house of your mother's father Bethuel. Take a wife for yourself there, from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now reside as a foreigner, the land God gave to Abraham." Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way, and he went to Paddan Aram, to Laban, son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, who was the mother of Jacob and Esau. Isaac blessed Jacob again, this time with full knowledge of who he was blessing. He invoked the name of God Almighty, El Shaddai, and passed on the Abrahamic covenant to Jacob. Everything Isaac said confirmed what the stolen blessing had already declared. Jacob was now the carrier of God's promise to Abraham. So Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He was alone, running for his life, heading toward a distant land he had never seen to stay with an uncle he had never met. He left with nothing but a staff in his hand. Everything he had schemed and deceived to obtain, the birthright, the blessing, the inheritance, none of it meant anything right now. He was a fugitive, fleeing from his brother's rage, uncertain of what lay ahead. The deceiver had won everything and lost everything in the same moment. Jacob traveled north from Beersheba toward Haran, a journey of more than 400 miles. On his first night as a fugitive, as the sun was setting, Jacob reached a certain place and decided to stop for the night. Genesis 28:10-11 describes that evening. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. There was nothing special about this place, at least not yet. Jacob simply stopped when darkness fell. He had no tent, no servants, no comfortable bedding. He took a stone, put it under his head as a pillow, and lay down under the stars. It was a rough beginning to his exile, alone in the wilderness with only rocks for comfort. But that night, God met him. Genesis 28:12-15 records the dream that would change everything. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Think about what Jacob saw, a stairway connecting earth and heaven, with angels moving up and down, and at the top stood the Lord himself. This wasn't just a dream. This was a direct encounter with God, and God didn't condemn Jacob for his deception. He didn't lecture him about stealing the blessing. Instead, God confirmed everything. He gave Jacob the same promises he had given to Abraham and Isaac: the land, descendants as numerous as dust, and a blessing that would extend to all peoples on earth. But perhaps the most important words were these: "I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Jacob was running away as a fugitive, alone and afraid, and God promised to stay with him. God promised to bring him back. God promised not to abandon him until every promise was fulfilled. When Jacob woke up, he was overwhelmed. Genesis 28:16-17 shows his response. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." He was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Jacob had thought he was alone in an ordinary place, just another spot to sleep during his escape. But he woke up realizing he had been in the presence of God all along. The place wasn't ordinary. It was the house of God, the very gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob did something significant. Genesis 28:18-19 tells us, "Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. The stone that had been his pillow became a sacred marker. He poured oil on it, an act of consecration, setting it apart as holy. And he named the place Bethel, which means house of God. This moment was so important that the old name of the city, Luz, would be forgotten. From that day forward, it would be known as Bethel. But Jacob didn't just mark the place and move on. He made a vow. Genesis 28:20-22 records his words. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and of all that you give me I will give you a tenth." Jacob's vow reveals where he was spiritually. He made it conditional. If God will be with me. God had just promised unconditionally to be with him, but Jacob was still thinking in terms of transactions and deals. He was still the schemer, the negotiator. If God would provide for him and bring him home safely, then, and only then, would the Lord be his God. Despite Jacob's conditional faith, God had made an unconditional promise. Jacob was beginning a journey that would take him far from home, into years of hard labor and deception at the hands of others. But he wasn't going alone. The deceiver was now under the protection of the God of Abraham and Isaac, whether he fully understood it yet or not. Jacob continued his journey from Bethel, traveling northeast toward the land of the eastern peoples. Genesis 29:1-2 tells us what happened when he finally arrived. Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. There he saw a well in the open country with 3 flocks of sheep lying near it, because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. This was the meeting place for shepherds in that region. Jacob approached and started talking with them. Genesis 29:4-6 records their conversation. Jacob asked the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they replied. He said to them, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" "Yes, we know him," they answered. Then Jacob asked them, "Is he well?" "Yes, he is," they said, "and here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep." Perfect timing. Jacob had traveled over 400 miles and arrived at exactly the right moment. Genesis 29:9 confirms, while he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. What happened next was extraordinary. Genesis 29:10-11 describes Jacob's reaction. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of his uncle Laban, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. The stone covering the well was large, so large that it normally took multiple shepherds working together to move it. But when Jacob saw Rachel, he walked over and rolled it away by himself. After the long, difficult journey, after fleeing from his brother's murderous rage, Jacob had finally found his mother's family. He kissed Rachel in greeting and wept loudly, overcome with relief and joy. Genesis 29:12 tells us what he said. He had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and a son of Rebekah, so she ran and told her father. Rachel immediately ran home with the news. Laban's response was enthusiastic. Genesis 29:13-14 describes their reunion. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home, and there Jacob told him all these things. Then Laban said to him, "You are my own flesh and blood." Jacob had found refuge with family. He had no idea that he was about to meet a man who could match him, scheme for scheme, deception for deception. Jacob stayed with Laban for a month, working for him during that time. Genesis 29:14-15 sets up what comes next. And Jacob stayed with him for a whole month. Then Laban said to him, "Just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." Laban had two daughters. Genesis 29:16-17 describes them. Now Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob had already fallen in love with Rachel. Genesis 29:18 records his offer. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, "I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel." 7 years of labor was an enormous bride price, far more than normal. But Jacob loved Rachel that much. Laban agreed immediately. Genesis 29:19 shows his response. Laban said, "It's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me." So Jacob worked 7 years for Rachel. Genesis 29:20 tells us something remarkable. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. 7 years felt like days because of how deeply he loved her. Finally, the 7 years ended. Genesis 29:21 shows his directness. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her." Jacob had fulfilled his part of the bargain. Laban threw a wedding feast. Genesis 29:22 tells us, "So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. There was celebration, food, and undoubtedly plenty of wine. But that night, Laban executed his deception." Genesis 29:23-25 reveals what happened. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" The deceiver had been deceived. Jacob used the exact word, deceived. He knew that feeling intimately because he had done it to others. Laban's excuse was cultural tradition. Genesis 29:26-28 records his response. Laban replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one." Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also, in return for another 7 years of work." And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Jacob had to complete the week-long wedding celebration with Leah, 7 days, with a woman he hadn't wanted to marry. Then he would get Rachel, but only if he promised to work another 7 years. Jacob agreed. He had no choice. Genesis 29:30 completes the picture. Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years. Jacob now had 2 wives, the one he loved and the one he was tricked into marrying. His love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah, and everyone knew it. The Lord saw Leah's painful situation. Genesis 29:31 tells us, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. Leah had 4 sons in succession. Genesis 29:32-35 records each birth. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too." So she named him Simeon. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." So he was named Levi. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "This time I will praise the Lord." So she named him Judah. Then she stopped having children. With each son, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Leah hoped to win Jacob's love. Finally, with Judah, she stopped trying to earn Jacob's affection and instead praised the Lord. Meanwhile, Rachel remained barren, and it was destroying her. Genesis 30:1-2 shows her desperation. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, "Give me children, or I'll die." Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God, who has kept you from having children?" Rachel gave Jacob her servant Bilhah. Genesis 33:8 tells us, "Then she said, 'Here is Bilhah, my servant. Sleep with her, so that she can bear children for me, and I too can build a family through her.' So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife. Jacob slept with her, and Bilhah conceived and bore him a son. Then Rachel said, 'God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son.' Because of this, she named him Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, 'I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won.' So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she did the same thing. Genesis 39:13 continues. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "What good fortune!" So she named him Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "How happy I am! The women will call me happy." So she named him Asher. Through a strange negotiation involving mandrake plants, Leah had 2 more sons and a daughter. Genesis 30:17-21 records, "God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a 5th son. Then Leah said, 'God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband.' So she named him Issachar. Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son. Then Leah said, 'God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor because I have borne him 6 sons.' So she named him Zebulun. Sometime later she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Finally, God remembered Rachel. Genesis 30:22-24 describes the answer to years of desperate prayers. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." She named him Joseph and said, "May the Lord add to me another son." Jacob now had 11 sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, and Joseph, plus one daughter, Dinah. After Joseph was born, Jacob decided it was time to go home. Genesis 30:25-26 shows his request. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way, so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban didn't want to lose him. Genesis 30:27-28 reveals why. But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He added, "Name your wages and I will pay them." Jacob proposed an unusual arrangement. Genesis 30:31-33 spells out the details. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied. "But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future whenever you check on the wages you have paid me. Any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored, will be considered stolen." Laban agreed immediately. Genesis 30:34 records, "Agreed," said Laban. "Let it be as you have said." But then Laban tried to cheat. Genesis 30:35-36 shows his deception. That same day he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Jacob used selective breeding techniques. Genesis 30:41-42 shows how strategic he was. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals so they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban and the strong ones to Jacob. The result was dramatic. Genesis 30:43 summarizes, "In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys." Jacob's growing wealth created problems. Genesis 31:1-2 describes the changing atmosphere. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, "Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father." And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Then God spoke. Genesis 31:3 records, "Then the Lord said to Jacob, 'Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you.'" Jacob called Rachel and Leah and explained everything. Genesis 31:6-9 shows part of his explanation. "You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, 'The speckled ones will be your wages,' then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said, 'The streaked ones will be your wages,' then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me." Rachel and Leah agreed completely. Genesis 31:14-16 shows their response. Then Rachel and Leah replied, "Do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you." So Jacob put his plan into action. Genesis 31:17-19 describes the departure. Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Paddan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Rachel took Laban's household idols. Genesis 31:20-21 continues, Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. 3 days passed before Laban discovered Jacob had fled. Genesis 31:22-23 describes his response. On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. But God intervened. Genesis 31:24 tells us, Then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said to him, Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Laban caught up with Jacob. Genesis 31:26-30 records Laban's accusations. Then Laban said to Jacob, What have you done? You've deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me, so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you, but last night the God of your father said to me, Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods? Jacob defended himself. Genesis 31:31-32 shows his response. Jacob answered Laban, I was afraid, because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me, and if so, take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. Laban searched, but found nothing. Genesis 31:34-35 describes what happened. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period. So he searched but could not find the household gods. Now Jacob became angry. Genesis 31:36-42 records his passionate defense. Jacob was angry and took Laban to task. What is my crime? He asked Laban. How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of your relatives and mine, and let them judge between the two of us. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for the 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you. Laban proposed a solution. Genesis 31:44 shows his offer. Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. They made a formal agreement. Genesis 31:45-49 describes the ceremony. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, Gather some stones. So they took stones and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jagar Sahadutha, and Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." That is why it was called Gilead. It was also called Mizpah, because he said, "May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other." Genesis 31:54-55 concludes, "He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country and invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then he left and returned home." After 20 years of manipulation, deception, and conflict, Jacob was finally free from Laban. Jacob went on his way after parting with Laban, but he wasn't alone. Genesis 32:1-2 tells us, "Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, 'This is the camp of God.' So he named that place Mahanaim." Angels met Jacob on the road, a reminder that God was with him. But Jacob's peace didn't last long. He was heading home, which meant facing Esau, the brother who had vowed to kill him 20 years ago. Jacob sent messengers ahead. Genesis 32:3-5 records his careful message. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. He instructed them, "This is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, 'I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my lord, that I may find favor in your eyes.'" Jacob called Esau my lord, and himself your servant, showing humility and hoping Esau's anger had cooled. The messengers returned with terrifying news. Genesis 32:6 tells us, "When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, 'We went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him.'" 400 men. That was an army. Genesis 32:7-8 describes Jacob's panic. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into 2 groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, "If Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape." Then Jacob prayed. Genesis 32:9-12 records his desperate prayer. "Then Jacob prayed, 'O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, "Go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper." I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become 2 camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, "I will surely make you prosper and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted." Jacob acknowledged his unworthiness and admitted his fear. This was a different Jacob, more humble, more dependent on God. But Jacob wasn't done planning. Genesis 32:13-20 describes his elaborate gift. He spent the night there, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. He put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and said to his servants, "Go ahead of me, and keep some space between the herds." Jacob sent 550 animals ahead in separate herds. Each time Esau encountered a herd, he would hear, "A gift from your servant Jacob to my lord Esau." Jacob hoped the gifts would calm Esau's anger before they met. That night, Jacob sent everyone across the Jabbok River. Genesis 32:24 continues, "So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak." A man appeared and wrestled with Jacob all night. Genesis 32:25-26 shows what happened. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Even with his hip dislocated, Jacob refused to let go. He demanded a blessing. Genesis 32:27-28 records this pivotal moment. The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob had to speak his own name, deceiver. But then came transformation. His name would be Israel. He struggles with God. The deceiver had become the one who wrestled with God and prevailed. Genesis 32:29-30 shows the conclusion. Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." Jacob realized he had wrestled with God himself. Genesis 32:31 adds, "The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip." Jacob walked forward with a permanent limp, marked by his encounter with God. Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming with 400 men. Genesis 33:1-3 describes his preparation. Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men, so he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 female servants. He put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. He himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. Jacob arranged his family by importance and walked ahead, bowing 7 times in total submission. But what happened next was unexpected. Genesis 33:4 records, "But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept." No violence, no revenge. Esau ran to Jacob, embraced him, and kissed him. Both brothers wept. 20 years of fear and hatred melted away. Genesis 33:8-11 shows their conversation. Esau asked, "What's the meaning of all these flocks and herds I met?" "To find favor in your eyes, my lord," he said. But Esau said, "I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." "No, please," said Jacob. "If I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God, now that you have received me favorably. Please accept the present that was brought to you, for God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need." And because Jacob insisted, Esau accepted it. Esau suggested traveling together, but Jacob made excuses about traveling slowly. Genesis 33:16-17 reveals what actually happened. So that day Esau started on his way back to Seir. Jacob, however, went to Succoth, where he built a place for himself and made shelters for his livestock. Esau went south to Seir. Jacob went to Succoth in the opposite direction. After the reconciliation, the brothers parted peacefully but went separate ways. From Succoth, Jacob continued to Shechem. Genesis 33:18-20 tells us, "After Jacob came from Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. There he set up an altar and called it El Elohe Israel. Jacob bought land and set up an altar called God, the God of Israel." But tragedy struck. Genesis 34:1-2 describes what happened. Now Dinah, the daughter Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of that area, saw her, he took her and raped her. Shechem raped Dinah. Then Genesis 34:3-4 continues, "His heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father Hamor, 'Get me this girl as my wife.' After raping her, Shechem claimed to love her and wanted to marry her. Genesis 34-7 describes the brothers' reaction. Jacob's sons had come in from the fields as soon as they heard what had happened. They were shocked and furious because Shechem had done an outrageous thing in Israel by sleeping with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not be done. Hamor came to negotiate a marriage alliance, but the brothers replied deceitfully. Genesis 34:13-17 reveals their trap. Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, "We can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will enter into an agreement with you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males." The men of Shechem agreed and were circumcised. 3 days later, Simeon and Levi struck. Genesis 34:25-26 describes the massacre. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The other brothers plundered the city completely. Jacob feared retaliation. Genesis 34:30 records his reaction. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." Genesis 34:31 shows the brothers' response. But they replied, "Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?" After the violence, God spoke. Genesis 35:1 records, "Then God said to Jacob, 'Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau.'" Jacob purified his household. Genesis 35:2-4 tells us, "So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, 'Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you, and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone.' So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had, and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. They buried all foreign gods, including Rachel's stolen idols, and traveled to Bethel safely. God appeared to Jacob again. Genesis 35:9-12 records, "After Jacob returned from Paddan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, 'Your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel.' So he named him Israel. And God said to him, 'I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac I also give to you, and I will give this land to your descendants after you.'" God confirmed Jacob's new name and repeated the covenant promises, but joy turned to sorrow. Genesis 35:16-18 describes tragedy. Then they moved on from Bethel. While they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel began to give birth and had great difficulty. And as she was having great difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, "Don't despair, for you have another son." As she breathed her last, for she was dying, she named her son Ben-Oni, but his father named him Benjamin. Rachel died giving birth to Benjamin. Genesis 35:19-20 continues, "So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Over her tomb Jacob set up a pillar, and to this day that pillar marks Rachel's tomb." Jacob lost his beloved wife just as he was settling into the promised land. Shortly after, Genesis 35:22 tells us, "While Israel was living in that region, Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard of it. Reuben committed an outrageous act that would cost him his birthright later. Finally, Jacob returned to his father. Genesis 35:27-29 describes Isaac's death. Jacob came home to his father Isaac in Mamre, near Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had stayed. Isaac lived 180 years. Then he breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people old and full of years, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. Both brothers buried their father together. Jacob's favoritism would bring disaster. Genesis 37:3-4 describes the problem. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph made things worse by sharing his dreams. Genesis 37:5-8 records, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more. When Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, they plotted to kill him. Genesis 37:18-20 describes their plan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." Reuben convinced them to throw Joseph into a cistern instead. Then Judah suggested selling him. Genesis 37:28 tells us, "So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. They dipped Joseph's robe in goat blood and brought it to Jacob." Genesis 37:33-35 shows his grief. He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. In Egypt, Joseph prospered despite hardship. He was sold to Potiphar, falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and imprisoned. But God was with him. Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams about 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. Genesis 41:39-41 records Pharaoh's response. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." At 30 years old, Joseph became second in command of Egypt. The famine forced Jacob to send his sons to Egypt. Genesis 42:1-3 tells us, "When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, 'Why do you just keep looking at each other?' He continued, 'I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die.' Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. The brothers bowed before Joseph without recognizing him. After testing them, Joseph revealed his identity. Genesis 45:3-5 records, "Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am Joseph. Is my father still living?' But his brothers were not able to answer him, because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, 'Come close to me.' When they had done so, he said, 'I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you.'" When Jacob heard, Genesis 45:28 describes his reaction. "And Israel said, 'I'm convinced. My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." God spoke to Jacob as he traveled. Genesis 46:3-4 tells us, "I am God, the God of your father," he said. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again, and Joseph's own hand will close your eyes." The reunion was emotional. Genesis 46-29-30 describes it. Joseph had his chariot made ready and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. Israel said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." Jacob lived 17 years in Egypt. As death approached, he blessed Joseph's sons and adopted them as his own. Then he called all 12 sons for final blessings. Genesis 49:1-2 sets the scene. Then Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel." Jacob spoke prophetic words over each son, giving Judah the blessing of kingship. Genesis 49:29-33 describes Jacob's death. Then he gave them these instructions. "I'm about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave, in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre, in Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried, there Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried, and there I buried Leah." When Jacob had finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Jacob died at 147 years old. Joseph took his body back to Canaan. Genesis 50:12-13 describes, "So Jacob's sons did as he had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite." After the burial, the brothers feared revenge. Genesis 50:19-21 records Joseph's response. "But Joseph said to them, 'Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph lived to 110. Genesis 50:24-26 concludes, "Then Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am about to die. But God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land, to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.' And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, 'God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place.' So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt." Jacob's legacy lives on through the 12 tribes of Israel, and his story continues to speak to us today. Which part of Jacob's journey resonated most with you? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, remember, God is still in the business of changing names, healing wounds, and turning our struggles into his glory.